Hey everyone, Ryan here, or S Reaper G. Something I have been thinking about in regards to the next Mass Effect for some time is if Shepard should return in some capacity in the next entry. Shepard on their own is not a super interesting character considering, aside from player input, they're relatively just a blank slate. But what makes Shepard so compelling to the player is in fact that they are acting as an avatar for the player to project themselves onto. With that, I do have some ideas about what a potential return for Shepard, big or small, could or should look like. We obviously know based on the teaser trailer for the next game in the series that it's likely going to take place years and years ahead of time. Something we know based on the fact that Liara is seen in the trailer looking much older than before. She finds a piece of Shepard's N7 armor. Liana Rupert of Game Informer said that she confirmed with BioWare that this is a much older Liara in fact, so we know that it definitely takes place in the future. How far ahead, we don't know exactly yet, maybe hundreds of years, maybe a couple years, but something I pondered myself as a way of paving the way for the next generation is if Shepard maybe could return for at least the next entry in the franchise. Maybe not beyond that, but at least the next entry. Now yeah, Shepard already said goodbye and had their swan song of sorts, but what if like Mass Effect 4 or 5 or however you want to label it begins with Shepard in the aftermath of the Reaper War or shortly thereafter, or maybe it just takes place during the events of Mass Effect 3, or even similar to how Gears of War 4 begins with small snippets of war throughout the history of the world. BioWare could put us back in the role of Shepard for a brief moment in the beginning, maybe even allowing us to play through that military background we chose all the way back in Mass Effect 1. I do realize that introduces another issue where maybe you have your own headcanon because you're role-playing of what happened in that military background, so maybe that's not the best idea, but I figured I'd throw it out there anyway. Or you could even have us make that final push again to the Citadel as Harbinger touches down. This is ripe with possibility. I can't help but wonder if they could use that intro as an acknowledgement of what came before while charting a new course, or maybe even setting up the story. They can set up the nature of the new story by taking a brief look back at what came before and what has been. With Liara involved in the events of the next Mass Effect game in some capacity, I would be surprised if they don't at least address some of the plot from the trilogy. Having the player intro the game with Shepard could provide new fans with context for such an iconic character, assuming they haven't dabbled with the Legendary Edition or have players like me gushing at the possibility for where they could take us in the next game. The second idea I have, I believe, is probably less likely, but it would be pretty cool to see, is if they bring back Shepard, at least for the entirety of the next Mass Effect. Now go with me on this. I think BioWare should probably be treating the next Mass Effect as a soft reboot for the franchise, much in the same way that God of War 2018 was a soft reboot for that franchise, meaning it doesn't really ignore what came before it, but proceeds with a blank slate, picking up the pieces from the ending of the previous game and slowly introducing us to the next protagonist or the new characters we will be dealing with in the next game. You could argue that with Mass Effect Andromeda, they already tried this, and we all know how that turned out. It didn't turn out too well, but I think there is a way to do it where it does not feel like it's kind of half-baked or kind of not fully executed in the way that it makes it compelling for the player or newcomers. Now, I do understand that these ideas introduce a problem. One is the inclusion of Shepard could result in the upstaging of the new characters that are introduced in this game or in the next game, which I understand. And also the endings for Mass Effect 3 are difficult to follow up on given the very different ways they leave the galaxy. You have the Destroy ending, which destroys the Reapers and also apparently overloads all synthetics and other tech. Control, whereby you give up your corporeal form. Shepard becomes an advanced AI that controls the Reapers and uses them to repair and help organics. Synthesis, which merges the DNA of all synthetics and organics, so they in a way become one new framework and thus solving the conflict of synthetic life warring with organic life. And refusal, in which you tell the catalyst to suck your fat nuts and the cycle continues until one cycle later the galaxy succeeds in thwarting the Reapers. The point is, this leaves the galaxy in a vulnerable and rough state regardless of the choice. The Batarians basically got wrecked. With the events of Arrival playing out as they did, and maybe your Commander Shepard turns out to be some kind of war criminal, just saying, and Batarian space effectively being ground zero for the Reaper invasion, they're basically goners. The Gethar-Corians might be dead or alive, the Krogan might continue slowly dying, or actually, I guess the Krogan are probably doing pretty well depending. Earth is essentially a massive crater, the mass relays were overloaded, so shit is rough. So in this instance, how does Shepard return? If we're gonna go with a small cameo throughout type of return, assuming he got f***ing iced in Mass Effect 3, well, if the control ending is chosen, maybe Shepard comes back as the AI he turns into in 3, having given themselves over to control the Reapers. In synthesis, Liara or the other scientists could be putting in resources to research and understand the new framework for organic and synthetics, thus possibly leading to the discovery of Shepard's DNA amongst that framework, allowing them to piece together enough of it to recreate some form of AI that retains some of Shepard's memories and could communicate with them. Destroy, I imagine, is a bit more simple, as Shepard can technically survive in the Destroy ending as is, but assuming that they do survive. Shepard was aboard a space station that exploded upon use, and then he hurtled back to Earth and is likely under a mountain of debris, so forgetting the fact that Shepard may have turned on the God mode cheat beforehand, which I hope he did, otherwise I don't know how he made it, maybe the process for restoring him is similar to the way the Lazarus Project was done. Only because the task of rebuilding the galaxy comes first, so there's incredibly limited resources, so rebuilding Shepard this time will require more resources than they could afford at the moment. Thus the Council probably makes a difficult decision to stabilize Shepard so he can undergo cryostasis until they are able to focus more on rebuilding or recovering him. As much as I do kind of like Refusal in this instance and the way that it was added in the extended cut, I don't think that this would be considered as a canonical ending by BioWare, only because, again, it was added in with the extended cut, and even so, it's a bit underwhelming, you have to admit. You tell the Catalyst basically to screw off, and the cycle continues only for the next cycle to just make the choice that Shepard refused to make. So it's like, yeah dude, you did it. You showed them Reapers. Maybe. The other choice, or the way they could bring Shepard back, would be a bit more controversial, as they'd have to essentially pick the Destroy ending as canonical. Shepard recovers from his impressive dive of a massive space station and is essentially the main protagonist for at least half, if not most, of the next Mass Effect. This obviously depends on the timeline they're going with. If it's a few hundred years ahead, then Shepard is likely dead either way, so the cameo scenario would probably have to be considered if Shepard did return. The easiest and likely scenario for a Shepard return, if one is being considered, is flashbacks and references and maybe even some audio logs, a cameo of sorts, but my instinct with a character like Shepard that people see themselves in is to only bring them back if there's a way to give the players agency over the return, so my preference would be to be in direct control of them. It's the same way in Dragon Age how BioWare would sometimes tease the return of the Warden character from Dragon Age Origins, but I always felt that I don't kind of want them to do that because I have a feeling that they're going to make them a character that I didn't envision when I first made my character all those years ago. That being said, I think an intro with the Commander would be cool, or a kind of passing of the baton type of story for the next generation, but either way, it got me thinking as I played the Legendary Edition how much I miss Shepard and these characters. And yeah, we all have to move on at some point, but that doesn't mean we can't have at least one last send-off, even though we had a last send-off and then we're gonna have another last send-off. Let's just keep having last send-offs till the end of time. Let's do it. The other thing to consider too is with Legendary Edition, it does allow players to find the context for anything they do reference or call back to in the trilogy in the next game. Part of me does worry that it would drag down other parts of the game and they had to acknowledge every single ending in some way, because the reactivity would need to be woven throughout the narrative, assuming it's a real acknowledgement of what came before. The simplest option is to just pick one of the endings and build from there and decide if Shepard's coming back in some capacity makes any sense. All this could be pointless to consider, considering the next game is likely going to be taking place years and years and years ahead, and it having been long enough where acknowledging the ending to 3 does not take much more than a simple throwaway dialogue option, but the choice of ending, and if they do decide to cameo or have Shepard featured in any way, could be more simple than what I have described here, if it's even being considered. I mean, look, I don't agree with this, so don't take this the wrong way, but BioWare has been known to do this with their games, where they just kind of ignore or retcon player choices for the sake of telling the story. A good example is some characters from the original Dragon Age that can die, but then show up in the sequel, miraculously surviving their brush with death. I don't want them to do this with the next Mass Effect, but again, bringing back Shepard in any capacity, along with acknowledging the endings from 3, could prove to be a difficult task to overcome in a way that is satisfying for all choices without the others feeling shafted or underdeveloped. I definitely want to discuss that more in another video, but either way, while I doubt we will see Shepard in Mass Effect 5 or 4, I don't care what you call it, as cool as it could be if it was done right, but I wanted to pitch my idea out there for bringing them into the story in some capacity, even if it's a way for BioWare to say, we know you love these characters and this character, we do too. And thank you. Of course, maybe I'm wrong here for even thinking this and you want to tell me that I'm stupid or I missed something. Please take to the comments below and let me know. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and like and dislike the video according to how you felt about it. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you all soon.